Good morning. I'll be reading Magic Tree House, book number 14, Day of the Dragon King by Mary Pope Osborne. I'll be starting at chapter 4, The Great Wall. Jack and Annie ran around the farmhouse. At the back was an ox cart filled with bags of grain. There was no one in sight. The shouting behind them got louder. Jack and Annie looked at each other. Then they dived into the back of the wooden cart. They buried themselves in the middle of the bags of grain. Jack's heart pounded as the shouts came closer. He held his breath and he waited for the people to leave. Suddenly the cart lurched forward and someone was driving them away. Jack and Annie both peeked over the bags. Jack saw the back of the driver. He was calmly steering the ox cart over the dirt road. They were on their way to the walled city. Jack and Annie both ducked down. "This is great," whispered Annie. "All we have to do is jump out when we get into the city." "Yep," said Jack softly. "Then we'll get to the Imperial Library, find the book, and get back to the Magic Tree House." "No problem," whispered Annie. Whoa! The cart slowly came to a halt. Jack held his breath. He heard voices and the heavy tramping of feet. Lots of feet. He and Annie both peeked out. "Oh, man," he whispered. A long line of men was crossing the road in front of the cart. They carried axes, shovels, and hoes. Guards marched along beside them. "Let's find out what's happening," Jack said. He reached into his sack and he pulled out the china book. Pushing his glasses into place, he found a picture of the workers and he read. The Dragon King forced many of its subjects to start building a wall to protect China from invaders. Later, the emperors made the wall even longer. Finally, it stretched 3,700 miles along China's border. The Great Wall of China is the longest structure ever built. "Wow, the Great Wall of China," said Jack. "I've heard of that," said Annie. "Who hasn't?" said Jack. "Those guys are going to work on it right now." Just then, someone grabbed Jack and Annie and they both looked up. It was the driver of the cart. "Who are you?" he asked angrily. Jack didn't know what to say. The man's gaze fell on the open book in Jack's hands and his mouth dropped open. At that moment, he let go of Jack and Annie. Slowly, he reached out and touched the book. He looked back at Jack and Annie had wide eyes. "What is this?" he said. Chapter 5, The Scholar. "It's a book from our country," said Jack. "Your books are made of bamboo, but ours are made of paper. Actually, your country invented paper. But later, in the future..." The man just looked confused. "Never mind," said Annie. "It's for reading. It's for learning about faraway places." The man stared at them. Tears began to fill his eyes. "What's wrong?" asked Annie softly. "I love reading and learning," he said. "So do I," said Jack. The man smiled at him. "You don't understand. I am dressed as a farmer, but in truth I am a scholar." "Well, what's a scholar?" said Annie. "We are great readers and learners and writers," he said. "We have long been the most honored citizens in China." The scholar's smile faded. "But now scholars are in danger," he said, "and many of us have gone into hiding." "Why?" said Jack. "The Dragon King is afraid of the power of our books and learning," said the scholar. "He wants people to think only what he wants them to think. Any day he may order the burning of all the books." Annie gasped. "Oh, does that mean what I think it means?" said Jack. The scholar nodded his head. "All the books in the Imperial Library will be burned," he said. "That's rotten," said Annie. "Indeed it is," the scholar said quietly. "Listen, we have a mission to get a book from that library," said Jack. "Who are you?" asked the scholar. "Just show him," said Annie. She reached into her shirt pocket as Jack reached into his sack. They both brought out their secret library cards. The letters shimmered in the sunlight. The scholar's mouth dropped open then again. You are master librarians, he said. I have never met one so honored who were so young. He bowed to show his respect. Thank you, he said to Jack and Annie. They both bowed back to him. How can I help you? Asked the scholar. We need to go to the Imperial Library to find this book, said Jack. He held out Morgan's bamboo strip to the scholar. We will go to the Imperial Library, said the scholar. As for the story, I know it well. It is a true one, written long ago, but I warn you, we will be in great danger. We know, said Annie. The scholar smiled then. I am happy to be doing something I believe in again, said the scholar. Let us go. They all climbed into the front of the cart. The long line of wall builders was marching in the distance, and as the oxen started forward, the scholar turned to Jack and Annie. Where are you from? He asked. We're from Frog Creek, Pennsylvania, said Annie. I have never heard of it, said the scholar. Do they have a library there? Oh, sure, there's a library in every town, said Jack. In fact, there are probably thousands of libraries in our country. And millions of books, said Annie, and no one burns them. Right, said Jack. Everyone gets to go to school to learn to read them. The scholar just stared at him, and he shook his head. It sounds like paradise, he said. Chapter 6, The Dragon King. The ox cart bumped across the wooden bridge that crossed over a moat, and then it passed guards standing by giant wooden gates. Are the gates ever closed? Jack asked. Oh, yes, every day at sunset, said the scholar. When the gong sounds, the gates close and the bridge comes up, and the city is sealed shut for the night. I guess visitors have to leave before that happens, said Annie, or they'll be stuck here for the whole night, right? Yes, said the scholar. The cart bumped between the city gates. Rows of small houses were bunched together on either side of the street. They were made of mud with straw roofs. People cooked over outdoor fires, and they washed their clothes in wooden tubs. As the ox cart bumped along, the houses got larger. These were made of painted wood and pottery tiles. They had curved roofs. Why are the roofs like that? Jack asked. To keep away the bad spirits, said the scholar. How do they do that? Said Annie. The spirits can only travel in straight lines, said the scholar. Wow, whispered Annie. The cart went by some open tea shops. Then it passed a large market square filled with stalls and shoppers. People were buying and selling fish, chickens, firewood, wagon wheels, silk cloth, furs, and jade jewelry. Some people were lined up at a stall filled with tiny little cages. What's for sale there? Annie asked. Crickets, said the scholar. They make good pets. You can feed them tea leaves and enjoy their delicate song. The cart moved on toward the Dragon King's walled palace. They stopped in front of the palace gates. Green delivery, the scholar shouted up to the guard at the tower. The guard waved them through, and inside were beautiful gardens and huge mounds of earth surrounded by low brick walls. That is the Imperial burial ground, said the scholar, pointing to the mounds. Who's buried there? Said Jack. The ancestors of the Dragon King, said the scholar. What are ancestors? Annie asked. They are the people in your family who lived before you, said the scholar. Some day the Dragon King himself will be buried there. 300,000 workers have been building his burial tomb. Oh, man, said Jack. He looked over his shoulder at the burial grounds, and he wondered why it took so many workers to build a tomb. No, said the scholar. Jack whirled around. What's wrong? He asked. The scholar pointed at the palace courtyard. A dark cloud of smoke was rising into the sky. Fire, said the scholar. The books, said Jack. Hurry, said Annie. The scholar snapped the reins, and the oxen trotted up the stone path. When the cart rolled into the courtyard, soldiers were everywhere. Some threw wood into a huge bonfire. Others were carrying bamboo strips down the steep stairs that led from the palace. "Are those books?" asked Jack. "Yes, the strips are tied together in different bundles." The scholar moaned. "Each bundle is a book." "Look," said Annie, pointing to the palace entrance. Stepping outside was a man in a rich flowing robe and a tall hat. Jack knew him at once. That was the Dragon King. Chapter 7, Burning of the Books. The Dragon King watched the bonfire as it blazed up toward the sky. Around the fire, the air was thick and heavy. Bamboo books were stacked beside the fire, waiting to be burned. "Hurry," said the scholar. They jumped down from the cart and joined the crowd by the bonfire. The Dragon King shouted to the soldiers, and they began throwing the books into the fire. The bamboo crackled as it burned. "Stop!" cried Annie. Jack grabbed her. "Quiet," he said. Annie pulled away. "Stop!" she shouted again, but her voice was lost in the noise of the roaring fire. "There's your story," said the scholar. He pointed to a bamboo book that had fallen off of a waiting stack. "I'll go get it," said Annie. She dashed over to the book. "Annie!" cried Jack. But she had already snatched up the bundle of bamboo strips and was charging back over toward them. "Got it! Quick, put it in your sack," she said to Jack. Jack put the bundle of bamboo strips into his sack, and then he looked around fearfully, and he gasped. The Dragon King was glaring right at them, and then he headed their way. "Seize them!" the Dragon King shouted. "Run through the burial grounds," the scholar shouted to Jack and Annie. "The soldiers will be afraid to go and follow. They fear the spirits of their ancestors." "Thanks," said Jack. "Thanks for everything." "Good luck," cried Annie. Then she and Jack took off. Soldiers shouted after them. An arrow whizzed right by. But Jack and Annie kept running. They ran down the path to the burial grounds. They jumped over the low brick wall, and they ran between the huge mounds of earth. Suddenly arrows filled the air around them, and the archers were shooting toward them from the tower. "Look!" cried Jack. There was a doorway in one of the mounds. Jack and Annie both ducked inside. They were in a long hall lit with oil lamps. It was so quiet. Annie walked down the passage. "Hey, there are some steps here." "Don't go any farther," said Jack. "Why not?" said Annie. "We don't know what's down there," said Jack. "This is a burial tomb. Remember, this is creepy." "Let's just take a look," said Annie. "Maybe it's the way out of here." Jack took a deep breath. "You might be right," he said. "Okay, but go slow." He didn't want to stumble upon a dead body. Annie started down the steps. They were steep, and Jack followed her. The lamps lit their way as they kept going down and down. Finally, they reached the bottom. Jack blinked. Even though oil lamps glowed everywhere, it was hard to see at first. Then Jack's eyes got used to the strange light, and his heart nearly stopped. "Oh, man," he breathed. They were in a room filled with soldiers. Thousands of them! Thank you, and I'll be reading chapter 8, probably to the end of the book tomorrow. Bye.